Hello, welcome to Inside Sports Talk with your host, Johanna-Rosalye. I am joined today with my amazing co-host. Welcome back, Ed Cole. I've missed you.
Joanna, missed you, sis. How are you?
I am good and excited to be back and talking some sports and to have you back. So much is happening.
I know it's too much to try to even catch up on and try to even talk about it because things just happen minute by minute, second by second, don't they?
Yes, literally second by second. You're not kidding about that one. So we have a lot of sports to talk to you about today. We will cover as much as we can. We have baseball happening, postseason started. We have the NBA playoffs and the finals kicking off. We have NFL. We have news going on with that. We'll get into some of it and just do a recap of what happened and what we can expect for this coming weekend. So let's go ahead and dive in with what's been happening these just few days. We went into we just wrapped up MLB regular season, dove right into the postseason. We have wild card being played. We have 4 teams kicking it off. We have another bunch of group of teams going into the second day of the wild card games, and it's best of 3. So win 2, now you're out. And we have we have the real stuff, like I like to call it. We have that kicking off on Monday, the 5th, I believe, if I have my dates correctly. So it's just going hard. So we have Yankees are just going hard at it. We were talking just before the show, before we started, how the Yankees, Garrett Cole on fire. We also have White Sox, their first game, near to having a perfect game being pitched. We have the Astros, overcame the Twins. We have the Dodgers that are going to be going at it against Milwaukee. Is just so much to name. So much is happening. Oh my gosh, I cannot contain my excitement. But before we go in and dive into the postseason, I do want to point out an irony. And going local with the Arizona Diamondbacks, we all know, and it just happened not too long ago, and still too many of us is fresh to our memory, and a little painful being that they did become sellers upon the trade deadline. And we had a lot of their players go to other teams. So we had Archie Bradley leave. We had Robbie Ray. We had, a few others as well. And it's just finding the irony. And this is not the first season that this happens, to where they either coming upon a trade deadline, they go to another team, and those players end up making the postseason with their new team. Or even after a season wraps up, they leave the Arizona Diamondbacks, they go to a new team, and the following season, same, that happens as well. It's happened with Corbin. It's happening right now with Greinke. It's happening with Robbie Ray, who just, left Arizona. Archie Bradley. So it's just amazing how they have these players. We have these pitchers, and they trade them away, they sell them, whatnot. And it's just, the Diamondbacks still cannot get over that hump. They still cannot make the postseason. And we won't get in too much into it, because we can go on, all night about this. But I just find it that's, the irony in that, and what's happening as we go into the postseason and having these teams fighting off wild card games with these players with their new teams.
It really is crazy, because the Diamondbacks clearly didn't have the best year or the most ideal year that anybody expected them to have this year. With the 60-game rush, it just did not work out for the Arizona Diamondbacks this year. Meanwhile, the Los Angeles Dodgers continue to do what they do on top of the National League West. The San Diego Padres came on strong this year. They made the playoffs for the first time, I believe, it's been at least 11 to 13 years, I believe, since the Padres have made it. So they're in the playoffs. So it's unfortunate the Diamondbacks didn't make it. But like you said, Joe, at least the pieces they gave away in the deals. At least they went to teams, like you said, that are successful, that are in the postseason, that are one of these 16 teams that are fighting it out for a world championship. So if you're going to make that move and you're going to go to one of these teams, at least you go and you make an impact on that team and you actually make the postseason and you can actually fight for a championship. So I'm happy for those guys that unfortunately it didn't work out here, but when they got to their respective new teams, it did work out there, and now they're playing in October.
Yes, I'm happy for them as well, but it's just, a little bit of irony there, and they had those pieces and they were just given away. What if keeping them, and along with other players and making some other changes or additions, they could have been able to make it and be one of those teams in the wild card scenario, to be able to go to the next level. One of the things too, we have the Marlins of all teams in MLB, and one of I think I might have already said that, worst teams going into the postseason, fighting it to go to that next level. The Diamondbacks had a better chance of making it to the postseason. I believe it was 62 or 60% range, if my mind serves me correctly. Marlins were about a 12% chance of making it to a postseason, and how the tables turned.
Yeah, Joe, I just quickly looked up their record last year. They were 57-105, the Miami Marlins. And now this year they're in the playoffs. Even with everything that happened with them, with this COVID outbreak, they were the first team to have that major COVID outbreak. Remember how that started in the beginning of the season and how they had to postpone so many games and they had to go through all this testing. Same with the St. Louis Cardinals. Great for them. They made the playoffs. But all the struggles the Miami Marlins had at the beginning of this season, did they ever think it would turn around in their favor and they would actually be one of the 16 teams in the playoffs fighting for a championship? What an incredible job the Marlins have done to make this run and get into the playoffs, and now they play the Chicago Cubs.
Yes, and that's going to be a really interesting series to watch. A few games that, we have that game happening here shortly, or maybe already wrapped up by the time you're listening to this. But I'm excited to see, because of how it all paid out and how far the Marlins, because they were a complete surprise to many of us, maybe not all of us. And going into the postseason and seeing the teams that have made it, or at least in that wild card fight, who is the best one to go all the way? We have the Dodgers that are in it, and has been a major favorite. Hoping, maybe this would be their year. We have the Yankees, who just have started on fire. We have the Athletics too, Oakland Athletics, another team that wasn't too hopeful to make it, and they're in there now. They're playing against the Chicago White Sox. So we have the Astros. So that's, it's already been an interesting season. Come the controversy and everything that came up from the last season and everything that's come of that. So who's going to be the best team that makes it all the way? Who's the underdog?
Until you stop the New York Yankees bats, the Bronx Bombers, what they did in Game 1 against the Cleveland Indians, 12-3, they hit 4 home runs. If you can't stop those bats, and you've got a guy like Garrett Cole who comes in and strikes out 13 batters, you've got that type of dominant pitching and dominant hitting, it's going to be hard to knock the Yankees out in the American League. It's going to be hard for anybody to face that team and knock them off and not have them represent the American League in the World Series. On the National League side, of course, you have to go with what you think is probably the Los Angeles Dodgers. They had another dominant performance in this 60-game run. You would, of course, give the nod to the Los Angeles Dodgers. You would make them the favorite to represent the National League down in Arlington in the World Series. Oh, my gosh. There's so many great teams. This is so fun to have 16 teams have a run to go to Arlington for the World Series. Isn't it, Joe? This is pretty cool.
It is very exciting. I can never have, in my wildest dreams, expected for so much baseball, especially in a postseason, having, these amount of teams fighting it off.
And what I like is, at least in the wild card series, it's best 2 out of 3, like you mentioned. So the onus is on the team who wins the first game. Of course, now if you win the first game, you only have to win 1 more. The pressure is on the team who lost. Now you've got to win 2 straight, especially if you lose at home. If you lose your home opener of those 3 games because all the games are going to be played at that site right there. So if you lose your first game, now you have to come back and win those last 2 games. You have to come back and win those next 2 games and hope you actually win that series. So it's tough when it's best 2 out of 3 and you lose that first game. And of course, it's easier when you win the first game because you only have to win 1 more. So there's a little bit less pressure for you because you have to win 1 as opposed to 2.
Yes, and just for those that kicked that off early, those four games, 3 of those teams were the away team that won. So how more imperative and how more important that you're mentioning that, how important that for winning that first game is. I'm looking forward to seeing how these are going to play out, and is it going to be like how many are going to go to that third game and be battling it out. One thing I have in my head, question and just a food for thought for everybody, and I want to get what your thought would be on this and your take, Ed, with the Astros, the Houston Astros. Just going back to that for a little bit before we move on to our next segment. The controversy that came of it, we saw the brawls during the season and the comments and, how that still has affected and is affecting teams, players, and fans. Astros are in that fight to make it to the next round into the postseason. They have Zach Greinke, they have, the amazing players, Altuve, they have Correa. Of course, they've come up with some injuries but still they've been able to make it. How much more of a controversy or how much more liked or disliked are the Astros going to be should they make it to the next round in the postseason?
Oh, there's always going to be hate for the Houston Astros because of the scandal and what transpired and how people actually feel about that organization. But should they make a run deep into the postseason? Should they get past the Minnesota Twins and move on and actually even have a sniff of going to Arlington to play in the World Series to represent the American League? Of course, there's going to be hatred, and once they actually start allowing fans in, that's going to really change things dramatically, Joe. Once those fans actually start coming into those stadiums on a limited basis, of course, they'll have limited numbers of fans. But should the Houston Astros make a deep run, it'll be interesting. That'll be must-watch TV, won't it? Just to see how they react for the first time, having fans in the stadium and what the fans' reaction is going to be toward them. And it's just going to be some high drama come mid-October once this thing really starts kicking into gear.
Yes. So that's what I'm really intrigued to see. And like you mentioned it, once we have the fans rolling into stadiums and we can have fans in the stands again, how that's going to play out and how long is it going to take to kind of have the Astros not be so hated. I know that, with the scandal that it was, it's always going to be there at the surface or at some level. It's going to be there. Some are going to be able to push back, past it a little bit more than others. I'm not going to mention teams. That's also going to be affecting on the teams and players they play with, they played against, etc. So just how much time is it going to take to kind of get over that initial, what's a good word? I can't think right now, that just initial hit from that.
And I doubt it's going to happen this postseason because it's still so fresh in everybody's minds what happened with the scandal and how that hurt so many baseball teams that were fighting for a championship and they didn't actually get it because of what the Houston Astros did and how they cheated and left them out to dry. So every time a team sees the Houston Astros on their schedule, it's going to come up in their minds. And the fans will never forget and the players will never forget. And how the Astros actually went about it. They went about it so cavalier, like they didn't even care that they were a part of this controversy. They were the headliners in this scandal. The way they handled themselves, that didn't lend any credence that didn't take away from the hatred that people have for this organization. If they handled it differently, if they came out and they expressed themselves differently and apologized and seemed like they actually cared and they actually had feelings about this situation, it might have been a different feeling that other baseball clubs would have when they faced them this season. Yeah,
maybe. So, yeah, that's another thing that did not work out in their favor.